Welcome to the Vibrant Life podcast. I'm Sarah Nolan, a burnout prevention and energy management consultant, and I'm here today with Danielle Lynn. And Danielle is a shamanic practitioner who teaches opportunity alchemy to help entrepreneurs and gifted creators to tap into the perfect timing of their opportunities. And today, we're going to talk about the relationship between body, emotions, and energy. And this, I think, is going to provide some powerful clarity for you about what you've been experiencing in your body, and give you a way to tap into what's going on behind that and make some really powerful shifts in your life. So thank you so much for joining us today, Danielle. I'm super excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm really, I was going to say enjoy to be here. So thank you. I'm very excited. We have some very good topics to cover.
Oh my gosh. And we were just talking before this episode, and we've got, we could just talk for hours about stuff like this. So we'll have more topics coming. But Danielle, what is your experience so far with the relationship between your body, energy, and emotions?
It's a great question. Well, as many of us know, there's a very, very holistic connection between all the facets of ourselves, our bodies, our emotions, our mind, our greater energy fields. I'm really overjoyed that this is something that's becoming more and more apparent in our world, the relationship between all these facets of ourselves and how they're interconnected. For my personal experience, I would say what really stood out to me was growing up when I was a bit younger. I had been playing softball. So this is probably when I was in about 10th grade, and that would have been maybe, let's say 13 or 14. And I had went to catch a ball and my knee popped out, dislocated.
Oh my gosh.
I know, what an adventure that is. And, maybe as a cascade from that experience, like one of my lower discs ended up being kind of out of whack of my vertebrae in my spine. And, that was a very intense experience, being so young and having such intense lower back pain. And it was so extreme, that they did all the scans, all the MRIs, and they said to me, okay, you're going to, need surgery, but then by the time you're like 27, there'll be complications. And, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, like what an experience. And, I was given some physical therapy, like this is how you can help yourself. But what really became a pivotal moment in that was when I talked to a very trusted spiritual advisor at that time, and told him my issue and what was going on. And, he listened, very silently. And then he said, maybe what you can do is talk to your body a little bit and tell it what you might like to happen. And then I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, say this every morning, evening, and night, and give it all of your focus. And he looked at me and said, all of your knowing that it is so. And I remember just like it with all of my being going, okay, yes, this is what I will do. And he essentially gave me a mantra, and it was a fairly long one, but it boiled down to, all my body is well. Every part of my body is well and whole. My cells are all healthy and happy. I am healthy and happy, everything, and so it was this mantra, and I would say it, every morning, noon and night. And I did it with the full conviction of my being. And, interesting thing was I wasn't looking for an end result there, but I did it. And by the next time I was supposed to visit the doctor to look at my spine again, they looked at it again. They said, I don't know what to tell you. We don't see the problem there anymore. Like, it was almost like he was just like, And, there was, and it was funny though, because it wasn't even, I remember it not being a surprise to me because I stood with such knowing that this would be so, that it was so. And so that was one of my first experiences, understanding there was this interconnected aspect of ourselves. Like it wasn't, because there was no physical explanation for why this happened, but, it was something that I worked with myself on. And that being said, of course, there's so many layers and layers and layers to it. Like, where did it come from and everything? But I would say that was my entry point.
This is a really interesting conversation, especially for this particular audience, because I think, there are different types of people, I'm sure, who are listening and watching. There are the people who are very into faith in the unseen, and they're very comfortable with that. And then there are other people who are more they feel more comfortable seeing things before they believe them, and like to track everything. They've got spreadsheets for everything, and they like to see the metrics. And so something like what you just talked about is really interesting to think about, how, it can be tracked, but I don't know if it can be measured. You can track that you did it. You can track that you said the mantras and that this thing happened, but at what point did it switch, and what was the thing that actually made it switch? And so I think it's just great to have this firsthand story, that things, not everything in this world, not everything in the reality can be measured in the way that we typically measure them.
Correct. And if you like, I'll share a few open-ended perspectives on that.
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful point, because something I really want to point out as well is, if people were, because it is a very amazing and fantastical story. But if people were to ask me, oh, well, is that the way that you approach all your problems? There it is. You just say a mantra. And I would say, well, no. And that might be funny because well, it worked for that. So wouldn't you just suggest that for everything? But you point out a few very great things. And one of the ways I have found that this reality works best is it works with us. Mm-hmm. Okay. I always say we are creating from the inside out. So what may be an absolute true for me may or may not be an absolute true for someone else. And what may be an absolute true for me then may not be an absolute true for me now. Mm-hmm. And it's also interesting how you point out, the tracking and the timing. Because one of those very interesting things, and this is again in my own experience of reality, is that our experience of time can be very subjective. Mm-hmm. Our experience of time can be very personal because, we are experiencing it from a perspective, and that perspective is relative to us. So the passage of time is relative to our awareness of the passage of time and how we are choosing to track it. And so the reason I'm pointing all these things out is whenever it comes to things like creating in our body, connecting with our body, creating in this reality, the less rules that I impose from my perspective of how things should be, the more options and opportunities are open to me of how they can be. And I have found that to be, so I always say to people, flexibility of beliefs is one of the greatest tools you can have for yourself when it comes to creating this reality, when it comes to connecting to opportunities, when it comes to connecting with your body, because reality will always work with us in the way that we know it to work. Mm-hmm. So if you know for certain, for example, what I described wouldn't work for you, you are absolutely correct. This is not, what you know to be true for you is true. Mm-hmm. By the same token, I have found then one of my greatest tools is something I call unknowing or not knowing. being in a state of uncertainty, although we sometimes have like a negative connotation to that, there is a power in being a little bit open to not certainty, because then it kind of opens us up to investigate and get curious and learn and connect with new experiences. So I would say, you know, to those that might be listening and might find this interesting but be unsure, I would say, you know, how this experience might pan out for you would be very unique to who you are and be very true for what you know about your reality. And maybe the takeaway from the story I shared is not so much that this is the modality and this is how to do it, but that for the me that it was at the moment, that was an absolute knowing that resonated and didn't connect with what we know as modern day medicine and science. And that you may have similar inclinations or opportunities in your life, in your cycle, that might present themselves to you in a similar way.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that in the that idea of the unknowing and just being open to kind of like fluid beliefs, you could say. And something that really helps me with that, to be just really open to new ideas and different ideas, is the fact that our brain protects our... My phone is going, oh, hold on. I'm so sorry. That's actually a client. So I just needed to send her a response. All right. So yes, we have a protection mechanism in our brain that filters out like 99% of what is out there in the world. Because, and 99% is not like a specific, you know, it's in that range. Because if we were able to like see and be conscious of everything, we would just sit here and literally just like look around and not be able to ever do anything. We would never move forward because there's so much to take in. Like, we can't see all of the colors. Like, look around wherever you are right now, look around. You're only seeing the spectrum of like 7 to 9 colors, when really there's a whole lot more out there. We're not seeing the particles. We're not seeing the waves. We're not, and those are just like the physical things, you know, and then there are all of these understandings that we have to just like stay in our lanes. Like, that's a protection mechanism. I mean, that's how we function. But knowing that, you know, we stay in these lanes, but there's like a million different lanes to choose from. And so if somebody shows you another lane, it's like, oh, that's another lane. Let's explore that a little bit. And maybe you can expand your lane a little bit to kind of go into the other one. Or you can take aspects of that lane and put it into yours and then just stay focused on that course.
Yes. Oh man, I love that. I love that explanation. It's so, so exploratory. How fun.
Yeah. That's so funny. Now I'm trying to think of what I was going to say. Yeah. So we were talking about how there was, you had this mantra that you were saying with all of your knowing, and then that mantra and your mind created a shift in your body. And this is something that I have found just working with this concept over the years, is that the minute you try to control things, it tends to stop working, because it's not about control. And it's all about like what is needed at that time. Kind of, Danielle, like what you talk about, perfect timing. Like, that mantra method may have worked then because you just needed to have that particular experience. It may not work now at this time in your life because you may need to have a different experience that moves you forward.
Yes.
Have you experienced that?
Yes, there has been situations where like you, and I love how you talk about control, because part of, my understanding of, maybe what even allowed that mantra to work is, although there was a lot of knowing and a lot of focus, there was also a lot of surrender.
Yeah.
It was like I could place all my chips on just being present with this mantra. It wasn't that I was like, okay, now work, now go. It was very, there was this sense of just placing all that energy and just focusing on this one thing, which had that perfect balance between the action and the surrender, the listening and the surrender. So to answer your question though, yes, there have been times when I, turn around and be like, okay, well, I want something to happen, so I'm going to make a mantra about it, and I'm going to,
Right.
make it so. But I would say in some of those times when I approached it from that perspective, it might have been a more mind-driven idea. And what I'm going to say about that is, one of the most important things I have ever found in creation is giving yourself absolute clarity to tune into what you really want.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, there's many, many people who really truly believe that they know what they want. And I would say, and I speak from experience, that there's many times that the things we think we want are really just the workarounds that we constructed from a place of thinking about what we think we needed to have the kind of experience we believe we wanted.
Right.
If you're tracking that.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, and sometimes those were experiences implanted in us. Like if we truly thought through a family, it could be a well-meaning family member or well-meaning society or well-meaning friends about, well, what I really want is to be a doctor. What I really want is to have this kind of life experience, because on some level we believe it's going to allow us to feel loved and part of a tribe. And we believe it's going to give us that feeling of satisfaction and worthiness. These are some of the main ones that it comes to. So again, going back to your initial question, sometimes when we think, and then so we think what we want is like, okay, I think I really want this thing. I think it, I'm going to mantra it. I'm going to make it happen. And then, when we put all this incredible, powerful energy we are into attempting to connect with this, and then sometimes it'll go belly up, or it won't quite go the way it wants to go. And, then we sometimes go, well, then we think, oh, well, I'm not very good at creating, or I'm doing something wrong, or and this is and again, in regards to the body, sometimes, we may resist, like, for example, if we, take an injury, like let's say you pulled a muscle, and you're having a hard time lifting your arm, and okay, well, I'm going to, will this to be better because I want to go bowling or something, and it's going to be better. And it's, and we may find not only does it not get better, maybe we slept on it funny and it's aching even more, and we need, we need more rest. And in those situations, what's happened is we haven't fully embraced what is, which is such an important part. Because I have found that anytime my body has something going on, whether it's, it seemed like an external injury, or whether I've caught the flu, or, I'm sick, there's something my body is communicating to me that began at an energetic frequency level. And when I'm trying to only just say, okay, well, fix, then not only have I not honored that it has shown up and I have co-created it, but I haven't really, I like to say sometimes, have a heart to heart, right, with my body, and be like, well, let's talk about this. What is this? Can you show me what this is about? Can we, can we dive into the origination point of this? And this is connecting, like you said, to the emotion, to the energy, to the parts of it that, maybe we haven't, as a society, fully agreed on yet, that yes, this is so. And this, this shoulder thing might be that I'm, like if it might be asking me for a rest. If this is my right hand, which is sometimes known as the masculine energy hand, maybe it's showing me that I'm grabbing or pulling or trying too much with this energy, and maybe it's asking for a rest. Or maybe it's asking, for me to focus and surrender and relax a bit. And you don't have to try so hard. You can just do this.
Right.
Right. So, that's my exploration on that point of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a good point, to listen to your body and to not just automatically go for the remedy.
Yes.
Just not, instead of automatically going for like the Advil or the turmeric or whatever, sit with it and be present and do that exploration. We've been taught in this Western society to be the sense of urgency when it comes to our health, because when there's a sense of urgency, it's like, all right, you need the doctor. You're a helpless human. You need the doctor. You need to get to the doctor now, or whatever that representation of the doctor is. But in reality, we have some time to sit with it. And I'd like to share a couple of experiences that I've had, pretty powerful experiences with the body emotion connection. And what I do with my work is a lot of exploratory and experimenting. And I use myself as kind of my own guinea pig. So I'm always tuning into when there's a new sensation, when there's a potential issue. One of the first discoveries that I made with this was a few years back. I had this rash around my eye, and there was no real explanation that I could come up with for it. And it wasn't dangerous, so I wasn't going to go to the doctor. I'm like, I'm going to see if I can figure this out. And it lasted about 6 months. And I tried everything you can imagine for it. All the creams, the salves, diet changes. I thought maybe it was an allergy, all this stuff. And then I had this insight. What if this is an allergy to an emotion? And what I know about rashes is if it's an angry red rash, it tends to be rooted in, it's like that's how the anger is expressing, is through this rash. And so I did this energetic release around anger from when I was 2, having to do with an interaction with my mom. And immediately the itchiness went away from my eye. And by the next day, it had calmed down. And within a week, it was totally gone. So that was my first, I was like, wow, this is so powerful. Like, I didn't do anything to my eye, did nothing to my eye. I stopped the treatments. I went back to my normal diet, and I'm like, I'm going to see how this works. And then since then, I have just consistently done things like that when there's a persistent ailment. And what I have found is when there's like a really strong emotional connection, like sometimes I think like your body is just needs a rest. Like, I don't think there's always this really strong emotional correlation. But when you give your body the things that it needs and it still doesn't heal, then that's a clue that there's an emotional tie to that. And so that goes back to what we were talking about, Danielle, about the control and figuring out, okay, what really is behind this? Because if you find one modality works, like the mantra that Danielle talked about, that is going to work for a particular cause. If the cause has to do with an emotion, then that mantra is not fixing the emotional problem. So it's probably not going to work in that case.
Yeah. Well said. I love how you talk about, not just approaching things from a symptom standpoint alone, and I love how you point out you can do the steps to address things from a very, I almost want to call it a logical perspective. Like, all right, if something's rashy here, maybe gently wipe away to make sure there's no irritants or, all the normal
right.
things. And, but then we can start inquiring, okay, if it's still there, what does it feel like? And, something I would really invite you who are, listening, and I'm certain there are many, who have practiced this, to a level themselves, because I feel there's, many who listen here who already explore in these areas. But I would invite, if there's something in your body or a recurring thing that comes up, two things I might invite you to explore is, first off, to start having a new relationship with the way these things appear in your body. It's very, very common for us, as humans sometimes, to have a good and bad or right or wrong perspective about these things, which I deeply empathize with. I do it too at times. It's very easy for us to just be like, well, this is inconvenient, or this is how this is. But what's very liberating is when we almost approach it, when these things happen, and we might seem a little, if we seem a little stuck in them or a little unsure, I call them sometimes to put on our kid glasses, the curious child who's just going, okay, how can I see this? And it's not about trying to make yourself feel better about it, because this is the big thing that I want to emphasize. When you're doing this, you're not trying to just see things optimistically. You're not trying to change stuff. It's more of you're witnessing what's going on, and then you're opening up the container with which it sits for more possibilities to enter. Because when we're looking at something, we're trying to be, well, this is good because of this or this. It's almost like we're trying to push something down a path like that.
Right, yeah.
And when we're like, oh, this is bad, it's almost like we're doing this. So when we're looking at it and we're just sort of going, we're just like observing it. And it's also about observing your feelings and honoring those feelings. Like, yeah, I'm pretty mad about this. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, this is frustrating. Interesting. Okay. Well, this is happening. And but if you notice, like, it's not denying the feeling. It's not making it right or wrong or good or bad, but we're almost expanding the container from which all of this can sit. And again, you can relate this to like something that happens within your body, something chronic, something that's popped up. And once you've kind of done this and you've given it a little space, what happens is we pivot from the mind, right or wrong, good or bad place, and we naturally place ourselves in the heart space, which is more curious. I almost say sometimes the heart is curious and probing, and it's willing to play. And when we do that, what happens is we put ourselves in the perfect place for receiving possibilities, and whatever those may look at, whatever those might look like, as it were. And it's loving, because we're not denying what's going on. We're not rejecting our anger, even, because if we do and we try and stuff it down, we get rashes, right? We might get rashes, or we might, I've done the same thing. I get like, and I'm like, oh, okay, press that anger. But I wanted to invite, if anyone here is experiencing something like that, try the curiosity container where everything is allowed. Absolutely everything.
I love that. Everything is allowed.
Yes, absolutely. You can be as mad or just pissed off as you want about this, but it's allowed. And there's almost, as you're doing this, there's this container that says, and yes, that too is allowed. We're not here to be perfect saints. We're here to be, I sometimes think of it as the parent that gives the child, the biggest, most wonderful room, and there's nothing sharp or pointy that the kid can knock into, but the kid can roll and tumble and punch the walls and kick the feet and roll around, but there's that space there for that. And then once that's there, once that's expressed, and we can then look around and go, okay, well, now what? And then there's openness.
Yeah, because I've noticed that there's a lot of like being afraid of the fear, or being ashamed of the shame, or being angry at the anger. And these are all just, we were talking about this before the video too, how these are all part of the spectrum of vibration that's normal and healthy inside of us. And
Yes.
Even that shame, shame can be incredibly toxic if it's used in the wrong way. But shame can also, in a small dose, can be very helpful to just be an indicator. Like, oh, I stepped out of line and I feel that kind of like pinch in my heart of shame. And
Yes.
then it's like, well, don't be ashamed of the shame. It's just communicating something to you. It's like, oh, you were out of line there. All right. So just, you know, um, you know, redirect and do what's necessary to make up for it and move on.
Yeah, something I love that. Something I say to people sometimes is one of the greatest paths is, acceptance or embracing. And they say, well, what
Mm-hmm.
if I can't embrace it? And then I say, well, then embrace that you can't embrace it.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, what if I can't do that? And I said, embrace that you can embrace that you can't embrace it. And and I said, keep going, embrace it. You can embrace it. You can keep doing it until you finally get to the point where you're like, well, okay, I embrace it. I can embrace it. I can't.
Yeah. I love that. And that's almost part of that surrender that you were talking about that was so healing. I grew up, a good chunk of my childhood was in the 90s. And that's when the whole idea of positive thinking, positive psychology started to really be talked about. And my parents were very forward thinking within the psychology world. And so they like really latched on to that. But people didn't really understand positive psychology back then. And it was like, okay, if you want to be happy, you need to think positive. And so that's how I was raised, is it's not okay to be angry. It's not okay to be fearful. And it was like, you know, so what I accidentally, I mean, this was not their intention, but what I ended up doing was learning to hold on to everything. And it wasn't okay to express. It's like humans cannot help but have emotions and to be in different emotional states. So your options are to A, hold on to those emotions, B, run from them, which doesn't really, I mean, it's still holding on to them or stuffing them down, or B, expressing them in some way. You can verbally express them. You can express them by releasing them through some different processes. You can express them physically by, what I mean by expressing them is allowing them to flow and allowing an exit point. Like, you breathe in, you breathe out. You don't breathe in and just like hold on to that. Otherwise you're going to suffocate. Um, so, accepting all of the emotions as just part of that spectrum can be so incredibly healing for the body.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I perceive this so much. And I am so excited for each generation that's emerging right now, because there is more and more of an embrace in emotional health, emotional
Yeah.
well-being, especially for men as well. And I say especially for men because there was definitely a lot of pressure on men to really not, show their emotions, crying and things like that. And like you said, all of these emotional parts of ourselves, they had been really shoved down in favor of like, well, be logical, or, be, hold it in, do this. Like they were treated like an inconvenience.
Right. Be a man.
Yeah. Be a man.
Suck it up.
And, when really, we have, this actually relates to something where it's, when animals feel something, when they express something, they'll often express it right then or there. Like if you've ever seen birds and they're annoyed, they'll just start flapping their wings and they might go, and then, they get it out of their system, and then they're good. And the next second they're hanging out and they're good again. Right.
Children are like that too.
Yeah, like they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not inviting you to my birthday party anymore." And then a few moments later, it's like, "Okay, well, we're best friends again," like,
Yeah.
and or even when they get hurt, right? They'll like scrape their knee, and it'll be like this, like earth-shaking cry, and saying, "Okay, I'm good again."
Mm-hmm.
And but there's a freedom to that kind of expression that we may have not given ourselves permission to have as adults here,
Mm-hmm.
that I would encourage us to all reclaim, because even if people might find you a bit odd, for being this way, or it might seem that way, in my own life, I have found it so incredibly freeing, um, inside and out. And I have definitely found that it attracts into my life the kind of people who are authentic with themselves. It's a form of honesty. It's a form of
Mm-hmm.
self-honesty to express these things and embrace them. And the more honest we are with ourselves, the more we can receive knowing from ourselves that guides us along our lives.
Yes, and what you're saying reminds me of some relationship, how this interacts with relationships. Because when you're married or you live with people, there are a lot of opportunities for this to come up. Expression about different situations, especially when it comes to criticism. And in not necessarily criticism, I'm thinking about a specific situation that I had recently where my husband said something to me that was a little, I don't think he meant anything by it, but there was something behind it. And it felt condescending the way he said it. And I've gotten to the point in the last year or so where I just say, if something's bothering me, I just say it. And I try not to think about it too much because I just know that I need to get it out and create a boundary. Like, I don't like it when you talk to me that way. This is the way that it makes me feel. And then we have a conversation around that. And there are some ways to navigate that. I don't know in the moment if I did it as gracefully as I could have, but I think the biggest thing is that I did say something. And so we were able to kind of smooth it out and navigate it as we were talking. But when people need to express something about another person, remember, it's not about them, it's about yourself. So what a lot of people do is they'll say, like, this is my hallucination, or this is what I feel, or this is how I perceived what you just said, and make it about yourself and not about the other person. Because I think, we're talking, Danielle, about expressing ourselves and not holding those emotions in so that we can be happy, healthy humans. But there's often a fear of expressing ourselves when it comes to the other person. And
Yeah.
so simply going with that principle of, it's not even about them. Like it's not like this is a tactic to just make it about yourself. It literally is about yourself.
Yes.
And your perception. So when you do that, it lets go of the pressure on yourself to feel that shame about criticizing. And because it's like nobody wants to criticize the other person, but then you feel like you need to say something, and it takes the pressure off the other person to be criticized.
Yes. Yeah, it's very, very, very well said. And so interesting you bring that up, because, that's something that my husband and I have been talking about as well.
Yeah.
Criticism, because had a similar experience. Like, there was something he said, and here's the interesting challenge with he's also a very empathic person.
Mm-hmm.
You get
Same with my husband.
right. So we have this two empaths together, and
Yeah.
not only are you hearing what you're saying, but we can feel the vibration.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So some of the conversations end up, you can't slide it around, or like, well, that's,
oh no, you can't hide anything.
So, and I have found he's definitely, and like, this is true, I find of any of our really close relationships, they're excellent at really highlighting to us, where we might be holding on or not standing in as much integrity with our own vibration. And he said something similar, something that I felt had sort of a critical resonance to it. And in the beginning, there was definitely a poke here, poke back, a little bit of poking. But then we got to the point, something we've learned to do was take some breaths in between, which was challenging because specifically my husband and I, we can be the kind of people who don't want to set the situation down till we like resolve it through it, right? So but we've gotten a little better at like, let's have the space and then ground into what we want to create with the other person. And this has been my thing, which is you got to own then your feelings first. You have to, and when I say have to, you do that in order to not only come, because I know I'm starting to jump into a whole topic here, but not only are you coming from a place of personal power, you're also honoring your partner, because even if they said something inflammatory, at the end of the day, it's still my personal responsibility to stand in my power. And, just like if a 3-year-old said something like, well, you're a dumb face, I wouldn't be like, well, you'd go, okay, well, that's not how you talk to me, but, you still stand within your power of that. And it doesn't matter if you're talking to a 3-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 50-year-old or whatever, we still have personal responsibility in how we connect. And what I'm wanting to share here about this is, because I'm realizing I'm going on a completely different tangent.
Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah, I know. I'm just going to roll with it. But what I'm feeling really inspired to share here about these interpersonal communications is allowing yourself to have those feelings. I used to be like, oh, well, I shouldn't get mad at my partner, or I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that. And I'm like, I got to the point where I'm like, you know what? Sometimes he says things and I feel really mad about them. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And the difference, if you notice my words though, is he will say something, I will feel mad. It's not, he made me feel mad with the words. It's not that it's an acknowledgement that he had an action. And even if it's a response that was very like triggered or, from me, I acknowledge, well, he did this and I felt this. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I will go tend to that feeling. And more often than not, it will be, okay, you know what? We need a little space, because then I need to go, angry dance or paint or do something where I'm like, or write down how grumpy I feel, and but own that and not feel bad. Like, it's not like, oh gosh, I'm, here I am trying to talk to people about evolved consciousness and I'm feeling angry because of this guy. And I have actually found that there's a beauty to embracing that, because we are human beings, all of us. Evolved perceptions, awakening, evolved consciousness, all these things come hand in hand with us being completely and utterly honest and willing to feel those feelings. They don't go away. They're there, but when we lovingly and healthily give them that space to exist and play within us, and when we are owning them, because again, the key here is, we're not blaming others for making us feel. We're owning that we have this feeling, and then we are responsibly being, in other words, I am choosing to how I respond and how I direct this energy, right? How I direct this laser cannon of annoyance. Then that helps us, be these sovereign beings, and then we can come back to the interaction from a place of, okay, now how do we want to collaborate together?
Yeah.
Which is what I have found to be essential in co-creating. And on the back of that, I will add, I do know, this is of course most helpful when we have, like, let's say, agreed upon partnerships. But I do know there may be scenarios like in workspaces or people that seem to be in your lives that just seem to kind of, like, I didn't agree to this, or they're, they're there and stuff. And even then I have found that they are often our greatest teachers.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're our greatest teachers.
And when you do that inner work and do that personal responsibility and own your stuff and see, what is this teaching me? Get curious about it. What I have found in my life is that there are usually two things that happen. Three things. One is I tend to find that, okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought because I was just seeing something in the mirror, seeing a reflection of something I didn't like. And now that I have like grounded myself and really processed it objectively, it's not as bad as I thought. Two, I do that inner work and create some boundaries, and they have a greater level of respect for me. And that in itself resolves the issue, because the conflict before was about me not having the boundaries. And so I set the boundaries, there's a greater level of respect, and they're able to step up into that. Or three, they're not willing to accept those boundaries, or they're offended by the boundaries and they just leave.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I can't say 100% because I haven't seen all the scenarios, but from what I've seen, addressing yourself literally fixes everything.
Something I feel inspired to share on this topic, especially when dealing with difficult people, and taking responsibility for yourself. Here's a great story I have. So, part of what I do is I also co-run a business that I own, and we have clients in the business who, they're also running their own businesses as well. Mm-hmm. And by and large, we have such an excellent time with our clients. We really vet people like that we feel are going to be synergistic working with us. And there was this one client that came on board, very, very intelligent, very empowered woman. And, it all seemed very excellent. And then we started working with her, and, she really shifted gears into being a real taskmaster with us, right? Like, it was very interesting. It was like suddenly she was very intense and very, like we would achieve the goals that we set out to achieve. And then she'd be like, okay, but then these papers weren't ordered correctly. Like, it'd be like something very, very, it was
That's
just
so
that
funny.
It was, we would be like, oh, for certainly she's going to, chill out now that she sees this. And it was like, no, it was a very big commitment to having this intense energy. And I was thinking to myself, man, I wish she would just chill out, because, we're creating something so cool together with our businesses, and it would just be nice to have that energy reflected in our interactions. And then I realized my own thoughts towards her, like my own subliminal, internal energy towards her had started to become really like, almost resistant, almost expecting to push against her. Mm-hmm. And I started to go to myself, well, you know what? I'm going to shift this a little bit, because if I want her to be a team member with me, I'm going to show up like that. And I'm going to show up like that. I was thinking I was, because I was doing that externally, but internally I was kind of always bracing to like kind of, push her back a bit. And so what I did was, the first thing I did was I acknowledged my own feelings. I acknowledged my boundaries and what I was and wasn't willing to, choose when I met with her. And then once I was very clear on that, I essentially energetically started to speak to her. I connected, I envisioned her in my mind. I envisioned, I kind of like almost like if you knock at the door of someone's house very respectfully. And I said, well, hey, listen, I know it's been a little intense, but I want so much to invite you to be a team here, because I want to be a team with you. I want to, co-create some beautiful things with you. And the current way this is going, it's not quite the energy I want to make here. And, if you don't want to do this, I'm happy to have us shift away, but I'm going to invite you to join me here with this, and I'm going to meet you too. And for like a week, I would kind of send her these messages, like kind of subliminally, and in my energy towards her. When I thought about her, I imagined us, kind of, being a team together.
So this wasn't even you verbally speaking with her. No. This was just shifting your own energy.
Yes.
Around her.
Shifting my own energy around her, how I thought about her. If I wrote messages to her, I was also imbuing my energy with that. Like I was living it. It wasn't just like I was being like, let's play nice. Come on. Like, I was genuinely standing there. And what happened was, because we had weekly meetings, what happened was, and I did this for the whole week from that meeting onward, the next meeting came around, and we have a team meeting, so it's my team and her team. It came around, and we had a call, and nothing externally had really shifted. Like it wasn't like we got a huge win, or it was just going along.
Right.
And in the call, she was talking to us, and she started laughing with us and joking with us, and she was like, "Oh well, I've just been really happy working with you guys. Okay, we'll talk next week." And she got off the call, and my whole team was, what was that? And they're like, what happened? And like, they're like, I don't like, and from that point, and we're still working with her. And from that point on, all the interactions have been so joyful. And, but the big thing here I wasn't going like, okay, you better change, or it's had to start with me.
Right.
And exactly. and looking at how I was, even if it felt justified, even if it was like, well, she started it, or, I still needed to be the one that was like, listen, I get it, but I'm willing to show up as your team and as your friend. And here I am. And I love sharing that with people when I sometimes help people, because one of the things I help people do is I help them with their company cultures. I help them hire people. I help them close clients. And I talk a lot about connecting person to person and really being conscious of the energy when you're writing emails, when you're sending out inquiries, like how are you actually connecting with them? And even like whether you fully believe the person can hear you or not, people can pick up on micro signals. So even if it's just practice for you to speak to them, there's going to be something about when they interact with you that they feel that from you.
Right.
So yeah, that's something there that popped out to share.
That's such a fascinating experience, and something that I think is really new to a lot of people. It's a new concept to a lot of people who are watching and listening, and anybody can do that. You don't have to be like a special shamanic energy person to be able to do that. I mean, have you ever walked past a person on the street and just felt something, whether it felt comfortable or uncomfortable? That feeling is their energy. And you were picking up on, like, maybe this happens for you all the time. Maybe this happens, maybe it's happened once. But even if it just happened that one time, back when you were like 10 and there was this kid at school and you could just kind of feel the pain, from passing them in the hallway, you have the ability to intentionally direct your energy in any way that you want. And if you were able to feel that person who was in pain in the hallway, then you have, then other people can feel your energy as well. And they may not even know it, but they're going to respond to you based on what they're picking up. I mean, dogs are so good at this, or animals in general, and we're animals too. And so we naturally have that ability.
Yes, very. And it's such a great point, because I share this experience, but I share it because it's a mutually shared ability to all of us here. If you are listening to this, you can absolutely do this as well, and this is one of those things where it might seem, out there or magical or whatever, just because it's not something that, at a, maybe at a society level that we've really explored and focused on. But all the same, I would invite you, if you're curious, to run this as a bit of an experiment for yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, I am big on experiments. I love experiments. And, because the great thing about an experiment is you're being playful about it. You're just being curious. You don't, if it's not for you, you can always go, okay, try that experiment, next thing. But experiments are almost like doorways, to us finding new ways of living and being and connecting. So if you have maybe someone challenging in your life, or it don't even have to be challenging, it could just be like you have an interesting situation or you've wanted to communicate something, I'd invite you to do this practice, which involves basically first you honor and acknowledge your feelings. That's the most important thing. It's not about pushing past them. You do be right, express whatever needs to be acknowledged, because that is very, very, you're very worthy of that. And once you are at a place where you feel then ready, and you'll know you're ready because you're like, okay, I'm done with that. What's next? You can then focus first on how you want to be with that person, because you are the originator of this creation. You ground in that, meaning you just feel very, very solid in how that feels. And then you talk to that person with a completely open heart, and it's no expectation. You're not expecting them to change. You're not expecting them to do anything. You are just saying to them, here's what I am going to offer to you to create with me. And here's what feels good to me. And if you'd like to join me on that, then that's welcome to you.
And this is in your mind.
In your mind.
In a visualization.
Yeah. So, you can picture them. You can picture what they look like. You can look at a picture of them, or, just get a sense as though you're talking to them. And you don't have to send them anything physical. You just do that. And then if you interact with them, just interact with that spirit, with the spirit of that offer in your heart. Don't expect anything, and see what happens in about a week.
Yeah.
Give it a try, If it,
can't hurt.
Yeah, if it doesn't work, you just go, okay, tried that. And if it does, people might be like, what happened?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's what's really interesting, as I've done something similar, not with the same intention, but just kind of in my mind fantasizing about interactions with different people. And I love to always imagine the conversation, like what they're going to say to me, like what kind of a response would I really love to have from this person. And it's not uncommon that I'll hear those exact words come from their mouth in our next conversation. And it's like, it's not about me controlling. It's not about us controlling the other person. It's about us, creating a frequency within the relationship. And they have free will. I mean, if that's why I said often I'll hear those words. If they were not on board on energetic level, then they would skip over that frequency. But if they are on board, then it just opens it up to kind of fitting into that visualization, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
All right. I've got one more story to share to kind of wrap this whole conversation up back to the emotions and the body and these relationship conversations. It's such a beautiful trifecta that we've created.
I love it.
So I was telling Danielle that a few weeks ago, I started, I was sick, and then at the end of the cold, I got this cough, and it was a persistent cough, like nothing really worked to ease the cough. It was constant. And some people, even heard it in the podcast or whatever. And there were some things leading up to this. I was also at the same time as having this cough, I was triggered by some things. And what I realized was, and so just to pre-frame this here, so the cough is your body's way of trying to release something. Coughing, sneezing, burping, all those bodily functions are your body's way of trying to release something. And so I had this big realization, massive realization, that there were some challenges between my husband and I that had to do with my behavior a few years back, like a while back. And I had never taken responsibility for that. And it had to do with my work hours. And I was like way overworking myself and putting the family under a lot of burden. And I never owned that. I never took responsibility for it. And what's interesting is this happened right before the network event, which is a mastermind mentorship thing that Danielle and I are in. So it's definitely directly related to that experience with better work practices. And so I had this realization about the need to take responsibility, and I apologized for the first time. And this was like 6 years that, we had both been carrying this inside of us. And then the cough still persisted. But then when I got back from the trip, we experienced another interaction that brought up a lot of anger. And there are emotions that we store inside of us are layered. And so the top layer was angry. And I had also made the correlation that I was actually sabotaging myself. I was punishing myself. And I had this realization a while ago. I'm like, why am I punishing myself? None of these behaviors make any sense. I know I'm punishing myself for something. And so it all made sense when I had that realization of the need to apologize. And I had been unconsciously punishing myself because I knew I had done something wrong. And I was angry at myself, but I had never gotten conscious about it. And I had never been really honest about it. And so here I was punishing myself and sabotaging myself over this issue. And I had the cough. So after I released that anger, it was a powerful release. It was very visual. And because I was able to be present with it, like Danielle was speaking about in the beginning, I was very present with it. And I was able to just observe the process happening and just have zero resistance to the process. The next day, the cough went away, about 80 to 90%. And I was like, wow, that was really powerful. And that anger release came after a very open-hearted conversation where I just, opened my heart completely and was totally honest about everything. And both of us, it was one of the most powerful conversations that we've had. And then a couple days later, I had, when I was doing one of my energetic practices for myself, I had another experience of an emotional release, and this was releasing shame. And this is not something like I didn't intend to release anger before. I didn't intend to release the shame. These were things that I just allowed to come up in my experience because I was able to be so present and so open. And when I released that shame, I noticed that the cough went away the rest of the way, the 100%. And so that is, if you could follow that story, there were many different facets of it, but there was the communication aspect of it. The honest, open communication and allowing words to be expressed and allowing emotions to be expressed and being honest and taking responsibility myself in being present with the emotions. And it was such a powerful transition. I mean, it was affecting my body so dramatically it was affecting my body. It was affecting my behavior towards myself. And I'm guessing it was affecting my business because once I had this interaction and had this shift, my business shifted immediately. And it was almost like, oh my gosh, what is happening? It's like I just opened the floodgates, so to speak. So I just wanted to share that story, maybe to inspire people to be present with your emotions and allow the messiness to happen. It's going to be messy sometimes, or probably most of the time, and it's okay. And when you can be okay with that, then you can continue to move forward. But if you continue holding on to things and avoiding things and denying things, then it's only going to hold you back, and it could make you physically sick or affect your finances, affect your family, affect your health, everything.
Thank you.
So thank you all so much for joining us today. This was amazing conversation. We touched on a lot of different things. Danielle, can you give us a quick recap from your perspective on all the different angles we touched on?
Sure. Let's see. We talked about flexibility of your perspectives, being willing and open to experiment with things and with the way that you might approach people, yourself, and reality. A lot of kindness and compassion for yourself, and really embracing all of the feelings, including the ones that we sometimes see as negative, are so important and welcome as part of you. Express them, experience them. We all do. So, you are in good company. And personal responsibility as well. So part of owning and embracing those feelings also is a reminder that they are yours to experience and express. They belong to no one else, and no one else is originating them at you. And that once you take that personal responsibility and you process those feelings and with a lot of love for yourself, it clears the pathways with which how you can not only understand yourself, but others, and really makes it so much more clear when you want to create new things, connect new things, and also when you want to understand things that are happening with your body, with that emotion-body connection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all connected in many different ways. And just being present with all of that and accepting it. So powerful. So Danielle, what is the best way for people to reach out to you if they would like to have some help with the timing and the opportunity alchemy and things like that?
Yes, they can find me at daniellelynn.com, which is DanielleLynn.com. And I have many ways to contact me there. Otherwise, I'm also on Facebook. You're free to add me, and if you want to send me a message, that's fine as well. And I invite you to, if you feel inspired. I very much enjoy connecting with people who resonate with this, and I'll enjoy connecting with you as well.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for watching and listening today. We would love to hear your perspectives and your input on what we've talked about today. So drop something in the comments, a takeaway, a question, an insight, whatever's on your mind. We'd love to hear that and respond to you. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.